Somewhere in a cave system in South Africa, sealed away in near total darkness, scientists found a skull with a brain the size of an orange. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration. An actual, measurable brain volume so small it belongs in the same category as creatures that lived over 2 million years before it. Except this brain didn't belong to some ancient, primitive ape creature we'd expect from that era. It belonged to something that, based on everything else about its body, shouldn't have had a brain this small at all. And when researchers finally looked closely enough at the inside of that skull, they found something that has quietly rewritten one of the oldest assumptions in the story of human evolution. This is the story of Homo naledi, and why its impossibly small brain might be one of the most important discoveries in the history of studying what actually makes us human. Let's start with the number, because the number alone should stop you in your tracks. Homo naledi's brain measured somewhere around 465 to 610 cubic centimeters. To put that in perspective, a modern human brain averages around 1,300 cubic centimeters. Naledi's brain wasn't just small, it was Australopithecus small. That means it sat in the same size bracket as Lucy's species, a genus of small-brained ape-like hominins that most scientists assumed had gone extinct long before anything resembling a more advanced human ever walked the earth. Except Naledi didn't live during that ancient era. It lived far more recently, at a time when other members of our genus already had significantly larger brains. In other words, this creature's brain and its body were running on two completely different evolutionary timelines. Its skeleton, its hands, its feet, in many ways looked like they belonged in the same conversation as Homo habilis and even Homo erectus, both of which had brains roughly double the size of Naledi's. But its brain size stayed frozen in the past, like a message that never got the memo that evolution had moved on. So the obvious question is, how do you explain a creature that seems to be evolving forward and backward at the same time? And more importantly, does a small brain automatically mean a simple mind? For decades, the safe assumption was yes, small brain, small ability. But Naledi is exactly the fossil that broke that assumption apart. And the reason lies not in how big its brain was, but in how it was shaped. Here's where the story gets genuinely strange, because to understand what makes Naledi so important, you have to understand a very specific, very subtle feature buried in the folds of the brain itself. If you compare the brain of a chimpanzee to the brain of a modern human, one of the clearest differences isn't size. It's a groove. In apes and in older hominins like Australopithecus, there's a distinct groove called the frontoorbital sulcus, sitting right at the front of the brain. It's easy to spot in ape brains and ancient hominin brains alike. But in modern humans, that groove essentially disappears. It doesn't vanish because our brains got a redesign from scratch. It disappears because two neighboring brain regions expanded so much over time that they physically grew over the groove and covered it. It's like a smooth new layer of pavement built over a road that used to have a very obvious pothole. The pothole isn't fixed, it's buried under something bigger. Now here's the twist that should genuinely surprise you. When researchers examined the best preserved brain impression from Homo naledi's skull, they found that this groove, the one that's supposed to separate apes from humans, was completely absent, not faint, not partially there, gone, just like in a modern human brain. Despite having a brain that was 1/3 the size of ours, Naledi's frontal brain anatomy mirrored the human pattern, not the ape pattern. Let that sink in for a second. This is a creature with an Australopithecus-sized brain, showing a distinctly human brain structure in one of the most evolutionarily significant regions we know of. Size said ancient, shape said us. And it gets even more specific, because the exact region where this transformation happened isn't just some random patch of brain tissue. It's the region that overlaps with what scientists call Brodmann areas 44 and 45, a section of the frontal lobe tied directly to two of the most defining behaviors in human history: spoken language and the fine motor planning required to make stone tools. This is the part of the brain many researchers consider central to the emergence of complex communication and complex craftsmanship. And Naledi's brain shows a modern-looking configuration in that exact spot. Not a modern brain volume, a modern brain layout. Which raises an almost uncomfortable question. Could a creature with a brain barely bigger than an orange have had some of the neurological groundwork associated with language or tool use, encoded not in size, but in structure? If this sounds like a fringe idea some outsider researcher cooked up for attention, it isn't. This finding goes straight to the center of a hypothesis that has existed for over 100 years, largely unconfirmed until now. More than a century ago, some researchers proposed that early hominin brains might have been organized like modern human brains, just packed into a much smaller container. It was a reasonable idea on paper, but for 100 years, there was no fossil clear enough, no brain impression well preserved enough to actually test it. Naledi may be the first real physical evidence that this century-old theory was right all along. A small brain, built on a human blueprint. And Naledi isn't alone in this. It turns out there's a small, strange club of hominins that all share this same unexpected trait: human-like frontal lobe folding, despite drastically different brain sizes. Homo erectus is in that club. Homo habilis is in that club. And perhaps most fascinating of all, so is Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbit species, discovered on the island of Flores, a creature with a brain roughly the size of a chimpanzee's, yet apparently carrying some of these same human-associated frontal features. Meanwhile, older relatives like Australopithecus africanus, despite living millions of years before Naledi, show a distinctly ape-like brain shape in that same region. There's a clear line being drawn here, and Naledi sits on the human side of it, while creatures that came before sit firmly on the other. Brain size clearly wasn't the dividing line between ape-like and human-like. Brain shape was. This single realization strikes at one of the most persistent, unresolved arguments in the entire field of human evolution. Was it brain size that made us human, or was it the internal reorganization of the brain? For over a century, researchers have gone back and forth on this. Bigger brain equals smarter, more capable species. That was the comfortable, intuitive story. But Naledi throws a wrench directly into that narrative, because here is a creature with a brain size that belongs in the deep past, yet a brain structure that belongs in a much more advanced chapter of the human story. If shape can decouple from size this dramatically, then maybe the old assumption that bigger brain always equals more advanced was never as solid as we thought. Now, you might be wondering how scientists could even see any of this. How do you study the folds and grooves of a brain that decomposed and disappeared hundreds of thousands of years ago? The answer involves a strange, almost ironic stroke of luck. When a skull fossilizes, sometimes the space where the brain used to sit leaves behind a natural cast, an imprint pressed into the inside of the bone, capturing the rough shape of the brain's surface. And here's the twist nobody expects. Smaller brains tend to leave clearer, more detailed impressions than larger ones. Because Naledi's brain was so small, the impressions of its surface anatomy pressed more tightly and more precisely against the inside of the skull. In other words, the very thing that made Naledi's brain seem primitive, its tiny size, is the exact same thing that made it one of the best preserved brain records in the entire human fossil family. Researchers essentially got a rare, high-resolution snapshot of ancient brain architecture, and they only got it because the brain was small enough to leave a near-perfect impression behind. This is where the story reaches its emotional peak, because one specific fossil fragment turned this from an interesting data point into a career-defining discovery. Ralph Holloway, a researcher at Columbia University who has spent decades studying the brains of our ancient ancestors, examined one particular skull fragment. This fragment preserved a clear, unmistakable imprint of frontal lobe convolutions, the actual folded ridges and grooves of Naledi's brain surface. And upon studying it, Holloway said something that almost never makes it into documentaries about this species, something far more powerful than the usual talking points about Naledi's mysterious cave burials. He said, "This is the skull I've been waiting for my whole career." Think about what that sentence actually means. A scientist who has spent his entire professional life studying ancient brains looked at this small, unassuming fragment of bone and recognized it as the single piece of evidence he had been hoping to find his entire career. Not the skeleton, not the burial chamber, this fragment, this brain. So, where does this leave us? What does it actually mean that a creature with a brain the size of an orange carried structural features that echo the same brain regions tied to our language and our craftsmanship? And this is where the most recent research pushes the story even further than the original 2018 findings. A newer analysis, still barely public, examined multiple Naledi endocasts and found something even more striking than a simple absence of that ape-like groove. This latest study reveals that Naledi's frontal cortex wasn't just human-shaped, it was unusually convoluted, more intricately folded than researchers initially expected. The enlarged frontal region shows what scientists describe as anticipating the human condition, meaning Naledi's brain wasn't only echoing our structure, it may have been edging even closer toward it than anyone originally proposed. The story keeps getting more complicated, and every new layer of research seems to push Naledi closer to us, not further away. So after everything, after the orange-sized brain, the missing ape groove, the language and tool region showing human patterns, the small, strange club of hominins sharing this trait, Holloway's career-defining reaction, and now a 2026 study revealing even deeper human-like complexity. What's the actual takeaway here? It's not small brain. That's the headline every surface-level video leads with, and it's the least interesting part of this story. The real takeaway is this: brain size may never have been the thing that made us human in the first place. For over 100 years, the story of human evolution was framed as an inevitable climb toward bigger and bigger brains, as if intelligence and brain volume were permanently locked together. Homo naledi is one of the strongest pieces of evidence we have that this was never quite true. A brain can be small and still carry the architecture of something far more advanced. Which means somewhere in our own deep past, intelligence may have been quietly reshaping itself long before it ever needed more room to grow. So, here's the question worth sitting with. If brain size was never the deciding factor, what actually was? What does it even mean to call a species primitive when its brain, however small, might have been thinking in patterns disturbingly similar to our own? I'd genuinely like to know what you think. Drop your take in the comments. Does this change how you see human evolution? Or do you think brain size still deserves more credit than this research gives it? If this story pulled you in the way it pulled me in, subscribe, because there are far stranger chapters in the human story still waiting to be told.